All right, so this is going to be another movie review. This one's called The Night of the Hunter, 1955. Giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was pretty boring during the first hour or so. I couldn't get into the false prophet, wolf in sheep's clothing character of Robert Mitchum. This morning we were married, and now what does the movie poster say? Can't even scroll over. Scroll. Oh, this morning we were married, and now you think I'm going to kiss you, hold you, call you my wife. Boy, poor Shelley Winters. This is now I know where Ingmar Bergman got his idea for Fanny and Alexander. The scenes, the story, the stars, but above all, the suspense. What suspense? The Night of the Hunter is a 1955 U.S. film noir thriller directed by Charles Laughton and starring Robert Mitchum, Shelley Winters, and Lillian Gish. Lillian Gish is the reason to watch. I love the last half an hour. I love the beginning. But the bulk of the movie centers around this fake preacher guy who goes around taking advantage of widows and murdering them. The plot. The screenplay by James Agee was based on the 1953 novel of the same name by Davis Grubb. The plot involves a serial killer, Mitchum, who poses as a preacher and pursues 2 children in an attempt to get his hands on $10,000 of stolen cash hidden by their late father, played by Peter Graves. The novel and film draw on the true story of Harry Powers, who was hanged in 1932 for the murder of 2 widows and 3 children in Clarksburg, West Virginia. The film's lyrical and expressionistic style, borrowing techniques from silent film, sets it apart from other Hollywood films of the 1940s and 1950s, and it has influenced such later directors as Rainer Werner Fassbinder, Robert Altman, Spike Lee, Martin Scorsese, the Coen brothers, and Guillermo del Toro. Wow. Despite receiving negative reviews upon its original theatrical release, it has been positively reevaluated in later decades and is now considered one of the greatest films ever made, right behind Citizen Kane. Well, the influential French film magazine Cahiers du Cinéma selected The Night of the Hunter in 2008 as the second best film of all time, behind Citizen Kane. The negative reaction to its premiere made it Charles Laughton's only feature film as a director. Poor Charles Laughton got panned. Preacher Harry Powell is a misogynistic serial killer and self-proclaimed preacher traveling along the Ohio River in West Virginia during the Great Depression. He is arrested for driving a stolen car, and he serves 30 days at Moundsville Penitentiary. There he shares a cell with Ben Harper, who killed 2 men in a bank robbery for $10,000. Harper made his children, John and Pearl, promise to never reveal where he hid the money. Despite Powell's attempts to worm it out of him, Harper takes the secret to his grave when he is hanged for the murders. Upon his release from prison, Powell visits Harper's tiny hometown, where he charms the townsfolk and woos Harper's widow, Willa, a waitress for Walter Spoon and his wife, Icy. Overnight, Powell manages to win the town's trust, and he weds Willa, but John remains instinctively distrustful of him. Here we have Fanny and Alexander. Powell suspects that John knows where the money is hidden and threatens him to reveal its location. John accidentally reveals that he and Pearl do know where the money is. After Powell refuses to consummate their marriage, Willa deludes herself that he married her to redeem her soul. She begins preaching alongside him in tent revivals. She later loses her faith in him when she overhears Powell threatening Pearl to make her reveal where the money is hidden. Powell murders Willa and ties her body to a Model T that he sinks in the river. Then he claims that she left her family for a life of sin. When Walter and Icy question her abrupt disappearance, Uncle Bertie, an elderly friend of the family, discovers Willa's body while fishing, but refrains from telling the police for fear that he will be accused of Willa's murder. Powell threatens the children and learns the money is hidden inside Pearl's doll. The children escape and enrage Powell and they attempt to seek refuge with Bertie, whom they find in a drunken stupor. They use their father's small John boat to flee down the river and find sanctuary with Rachel Cooper, a tough woman who looks after stray children. She's like the Egyptian queen looking for her adopted children. I like that character. Lillian Gish is the reason to watch this. The rest of the movie is pretty bad. Powell kills a farmer for his horse and eventually tracks him down, but Rachel sees through his deceptions and runs him off her property with a shotgun. Powell returns after dark. During an all-night standoff, Rachel gives Powell a face full of birdshot. She summons the state police, who arrive and they arrest Powell for Willa's murder. John breaks down during Powell's handcuffing, having a flashback of his father's fate. He beats the doll against Powell's struggling body in anguish, spilling the cash. During Powell's trial, John cannot bring himself to testify against him. After Powell's sentencing, Rachel takes John and the other children away as Icy leads a lynch mob towards the police station. Powell is escorted out the back to safety just in time, but the prison hangman vows to see him again soon. This was the ending didn't make sense to me, really. I couldn't get what was going on at the end. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention. This was the only film solely directed by and credited to the actor Charles Laughton. Laughton, in addition to Irving Allen and Burgess Meredith, directed the film The Man of the Eiffel Tower. Meredith was the only director credited for the film. Laughton had directed plays on Broadway, most produced by his friend Paul Gregory. Director Charles Laughton in 1934. There's a picture of him on Wikipedia. He was good in The Secret Lives of Henry VIII and Hunchback of Notre Dame. Harold Madsen, a literary agent, sent a copy of the 1953 novel The Night of the Hunter by David Scrubb to Paul Gregory. He sent the book to Laughton, who loved it and described it as a nightmarish Mother Goose story. Laughton contacted Grubb, and the two of them instantly got along well. He traveled to Philadelphia, where Grubb lived, and they spent 5 days discussing ideas for the film. Grubb had studied art in college, so he offered to draw sketches as a form of inspiration. Laughton loved the drawings, and many of them were used in the film's storyboard. At first, Grubb was considered to write the screenplay himself, but the studio wanted to hire someone with experience writing films. James Agee was hired as a screenwriter because he was from the South and he had experience writing about the Depression. Agee began writing in April 1954 and he finished in June, but his script was 293 pages, much too long for a feature film. Laughton made significant rewrites to the script, and his was the version used for shooting, even though he insisted that Agee be credited as the only writer. Agee's original script ended with a shot of children's faces floating among the stars, an idea that was eventually moved to the opening of the film. I like the opening of the film. I liked the last part of the film. I did not like the middle 55 minutes after the first 5 minutes. I was trying to think, which part of the movie did I not like? Okay. Throughout 1954, Gregory worked with the Production Code Administration to change the script to meet the guidelines of the Production Code. There was much concern about depicting a preacher on screen as an evil person. Who cares? He's a Protestant. You would expect that from a Protestant. And Gregory made an effort to make the character of the preacher not to be a real ordained minister. He's a fake preacher. Well, if he's an ordained minister, then he's not. He's just an ordained minister is the same thing as a fake preacher, basically. Anyways, eventually the script was approved, but Protestant groups who had read the script continued to object to the film's production. Any Protestant protest against fake preachers has got to be halfway decent film. While preparing for the filming, Laughton studied silent films by viewing the original nitrate prints, including The Birth of the Nation, Intolerance, and The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Wow. He wanted to restore the power of silent films to talkies. The budget of the film was a little under $600,000, of which about $75,000 was for the rights to adopt the novel. Laughton's initial thought after reading the novel was to cast himself in the role of the preacher, but Gregory convinced him that no studio would finance a film unless they cast someone else. For the most part, he did not hold traditional auditions for the actors. He simply met with them to get a sense of their personalities and whether they were right for the role. Robert Mitchum playing preacher Harry Powell and Sheelly Winters as Willa Harper. So they got the murder scene on Wikipedia here. Laughton considered casting Gary Cooper as Harry Powell, but Cooper declined the role as he thought it might be detrimental to his career. John Carradine expressed interest in the role of the preacher, as did Laurence Olivier, but his schedule was not free for 2 years. I would have liked to see John Carradine as the preacher. Might have been a better movie, actually. Not that I'm against Robert Mitchum. He's been in some good noirs. Robert Mitchum was eager for the part of the preacher when he auditioned. A moment that particularly impressed Charles Laughton was when Laughton described the character as a diabolical piece of poop, and Mitchum promptly answered, "Present." Laughton liked Mitchum for the role partly due to his sexual persona, but Grubb was concerned about the character of the preacher being considered sexual. Laughton told him, "If you want to sell God, you have to be sexy." Okay. Agnes Moorehead, Grace Kelly, and Betty Grable were all considered for the role of Willa Harper. I think I like Shelley Winters better in this role. It would have been a good pairing to have John Carradine and Shelley Winters together. That would have been fun. In the end, Laughton chose Shelley Winters because he felt she had a vulnerable quality that was more of a serious character than a movie star. She committed to the role only 2 weeks before filming began. In her 1989 memoir, Winters described this as probably the most thoughtful and reserved performance I ever gave. Laughton's first pick for the role of Rachel Cooper was his wife, Elsa Lancaster. Jane Danwell and Luis Fazenda were also considered. Lancaster, for reasons unknown to Laughton, turned down the role, suggesting silent movie star Lillian Gish for the role. Doubtful, Laughton went to New York for the purpose of watching films in which Gish starred. These included the shorts and feature films she made with pioneer D.W. Griffith. Gish had gotten word of his watching these old movies, and when she asked him why, he replied, "When I first went to the movies, they sat in their seats straight and leaned forward. Now they slump down with their heads back and eat candy and popcorn. I want them to sit up straight again." Principal photography for The Night of the Hunter began on August 15 and ended on October 7th, 1954, a total of 36 days of shooting. Laughton kept the editor and musical composer on set during filming, which was very uncommon at the time. Mitchum originally suggested that Laughton shoot the film in authentic Appalachian locations, but the director could not afford the budget to do on-location shooting. Besides, he wanted to create a film's unique look on Hollywood sound stages, and he found he was looking at Path, Republic Studios, and Rollin V. Lee Ranch in San Fernando Valley. Certain cutaway shots and composing shots were shot in West Virginia. Laughton hired Terry Sanders as second unit director in order to scout and shoot the river scenes because he had recently directed an Academy Award-winning short film, A Time Out of War, which mostly took place on a river. A lighting arrangement in the Night of Hunter. Note the place of the key light off the subject, Lillian Gish, to create a silhouette while illuminating Robert Mitchum in the background. This plays off the conventional association of light with good and darkness with evil. Rather than shooting with traditional takes, Laughton had the crew only slate at the beginning of each reel of the film and let the camera roll continuously until the reel ran out. This was so that he could direct the actors without waiting to reset the camera and sound equipment, not unlike the way silent films used to be directed. Shelley Winters told Laughton she had this image of Willa as being a fly, fascinated by a spider, and she very willingly walks into this web. There's actually a spider web on the river that looked kind of interesting. I've never seen a spider web like that. He liked this image and told her to channel that into the performance. Indeed, a stylized spider and web are seen as the children make their way along the riverbank at night, fleeing Mitchum. Stylized spider and web. Mitchum's performance in the film has been described as Brechtian acting, which Laughton had extensive experience with. According to Lillian Gish, Laughton was very unsure of himself on set, as it was his first time directing a film. And when someone would give him a suggestion, he would start talking about fears that his whole vision was wrong. Laughton's directing style was supportive and respectful of the actors' input, and several of the actors have said it was among their favorite professional experiences. The director of photography was Stanley Cortez, who also shot Orson Welles' 1942 film The Magnificent Ambersons. Because Laughton had very little experience working with film, Cortez would visit his house to explain various concepts of camera lenses, camera heights, and what effect each of them gave. Laughton told Cortez that the nitrate prints of the silent movies that he'd been watching for research impressed them and how sharp they looked, so he asked Cortez to create the same sharpness for The Night of the Hunter. The studio brought most of the crew from a recent film, Black Tuesday, because they had worked so well together, and Cortez had experimented with a new black and white film, Kodak Tri-X, on that production with great results. He chose to shot certain scenes of this film in Tri-X because it had a sharp contrast that would help fulfill Laughton's vision. The studio, however, tried to convince them to shoot on color film instead because they thought it would sell more tickets. Gregory fought to keep it black and white. I could not see this film being in color. The style of cinematography was split up between the two units. The first unit of the crew shot the scenes in and around Harper's home, which were very dark, whereas the second unit shot the scenes traveling along the river, which were designed to look more like images from the children's perspective. One scene in particular that Cortez had spoken about is in the bedroom after Willow overheard Powell threatening the children. He lit the scene with a halo of light surrounding Willow's head on a pillow, foreshadowing that her death is imminent. Cortez also brought back the iris shot in one scene as homage to silent films. Laughton drew on the harsh, angular look of German expressionist films of the 1920s, which is especially noticeable in the art director of Hilliard Brown. He had the idea that children notice only certain details of their surroundings that are focused on, which is why some set pieces are somewhat abstract and minimal. Neon lights that are not attracted to a particular store, white picket fences that are not surrounding any house, the barn along the river that looks like a painting, and a chapel-like parent's bedroom. The river scenes with the children were all shot on a soundstage. The shot of John looking out the barn window and seeing Powell's silhouette on the horizon was created using a little person and a miniature house. The underwater scene showing Willow's dead body was shot in a studio using a mannequin with a custom mask to make it look like Winters. The film's score, composed and arranged by Walter Schumann in close association with Laughton, features a combination of nostalgic and expressionistic orchestral passages. The film has two songs by Schumann, Lullaby sung by Kitty White, whom Schumann discovered in a nightclub, and Pretty Fly, originally sung by Sally Jane Bruce as Pearl, but later dubbed by an actress named Betty Benson. A recurring musical device involves the preacher making his presence known by singing the traditional hymn, leaning on the everlasting arms. RCA Victor was impressed by the scene, so in 1955 they released a soundtrack with Schumann's score and Laughton narrating an abridged version of the story, also written by Grubb. The film's editor, Robert Golden, has said that after he screened the complete film to one of the United Artists studio executives for the first time, the executive told Golden it's too arty. The Night of the Hunter premiered on July 26, 1955 in Des Moines, Iowa, a special event to raise money for the YMCA in Gregory's hometown, which included a parade and a broadcast on The Tonight Show. It later had its premiere in Los Angeles on August 26, 1955, and in New York on September 29, 1955. To promote the film, the Los Angeles Herald Express serialized the film's script throughout April 1955. The film also received an extensive promotional campaign from United Artists, but they weren't sure about the best way to promote it since it didn't fall into any typical film genres, and the promotional material didn't give a good sense of what the film was about. However, one of the film advertisements won an award for being in the top 50 best advertisements of 1954 from the American Institute of Graphic Arts. According to Paul Gregory, absolutely no money was spent on promotion. United Artists didn't have the muscle, desire, or intelligence to handle the picture. He originally had the idea to tour the film roadshow style, stopping at certain cities that were familiar with Laughton's plays, but he could not convince the studio. The Roman Catholic Diocese of Cheyenne denied the film's release, and Gregory wanted to put together a lawsuit against them, but the studio would not allow him to. Why would the Catholics be opposed to this film? There's no on-screen violence. All the shenanigans by Mitchum are on a fake wolf in sheep's clothing type of Protestant preacher. So actually, this film makes Catholics look relatively good, I think. The Night of the Hunter was a failure with both audiences and critics. At its initial release, Laughton took the failure of his first film personally and never attempted to make another film. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times called the film a weird and intriguing endeavor, adding, unfortunately, the story and the thesis presented by Mr. Grubb had to be carried through by Mr. Laughton to a finish, and it's here that he goes wrong. For the evolution of the melodrama after the threatened children flee home angles off into that allegorical contrast of the forces of good and evil. Jean Arneal of Variety summarized, the relentless terror of David Grubb's novel got away from Paul Gregory and Charles Laughton in their translation of Night of the Hunter. The start for Gregory as producer and Laughton as director is rich in promise, but the completed product, bewitching at times, loses sustained drive via too many offbeat touches that have a misty effect. Harrison wrote, the picture might have some appeal for those who patronize art houses in search of the unusual and movie fare, but the great majority of those who see it will look upon it as a choppily edited, foggy melodrama peopled with foggy characters. Life summed up the film. Sometimes it strains too hard at being simple and winds up being pretentious, it is still one of the year's most interesting and provocative films. The Legion of Decency gave the film a B because it degraded marriage. Oh, that makes sense. Okay. Now I see the Catholic objection to this. And the Protestant Motion Picture Council rated it objectionable, saying that any religious person would be offended by it. I wasn't offended by it. The film was also banned in Memphis, Tennessee, by the city's head of censorship, Lloyd Benford. Great Britain rated the film adults only. So we have some censorship going on with this film. And the Catholic objections make sense. Although, again, the bad person is a Protestant. So you would expect the Protestant to be in a lousy marriage. Over time, The Night of the Hunter has been reassessed and is now an undisputed classic. It began as a cult film with a small group of fans and regularly played at museums and in revival houses. Its popularity grew as a new generation of children were exposed to the film when it played on television in the 1970s. As the field of film criticism began to expand, many articles were written about the film. Roger Ebert wrote, "What a compelling, frightening, beautiful film it is, and how well it has survived its period. Many films of the mid-1950s, even the good ones, seem somewhat dated now, but by setting his story in an invented movie world outside conventional realism, Laughton gave it a timelessness. It is one of the most frightening of movies with one of the most unforgettable of villains, and on both of these scores, it holds up well after 4 decades." Dave Kerr wrote that Charles Laughton's first and only film as a director is an enduring masterpiece, dark, deep, beautiful, aglow. The source of its style and power is mysterious. It is a film without precedent and without real equals. The Night of the Hunter was ranked number 90 on Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments. In a 2007 listing of the 100 Most Beautiful Films, Cahiers de Cinema ranked Night of the Hunter number 2. It is among the top 10 in the BFI list of the 50 films you would see by the age of 14. In 2008, it was ranked as the 71st greatest movie of all time by Empire magazine. In its issue of the 500 greatest movies of all time. In 2012, Sight and Sounds magazine Decennial Greatest Films of All Time poll ranked it as the 63rd greatest film ever made. In 2022, the same poll put it at number 25. In 1992, the United States Library of Congress deemed The Night of the Hunter to be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant and selected the film for preservation in its National Film Registry. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 93% based on 80 reviews with a weighted average of 9.1 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, featuring Robert Mitchum's formidable performance as a child hunting preacher, The Night of the Hunter is a disturbing look at good and evil. American Film Institute recognition, AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills. Number 30, AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains. Preacher Harry Powell, villain number 29. Mark Callahan, the lead singer for the Australian band The Riptides, parodied Mitchum's character in the music video for the 1982 track Hearts and Flowers. Powell's speech about love and hate has become a memorable moment in film history. In the 1989 Spike Lee film Do the Right Thing, the carrier Radio Raham wears brass knuckles, saying love and hate on each hand, and he gives a speech that almost verbatim copies Powell's. The Coen brothers have referenced The Night of the Hunter in several of their own films, including The Big Lebowski. The dude abides, an echo of Rachel's closing line, they abide and they endure, and True Grit, the visual style of Rooster's Ride Night with Mateus, similar to that in John and Pearl's River Journey, and the score uses the music from Leaning on the Everlasting Arms in the episode Fall of the television series Better Call Saul. The Night of the Hunter is shown playing in a retirement home as a series protagonist Jimmy McGill attempts to deceive a number of his clients. Powell's hand gestures during his right hand left hand speech are juxtaposed with similar gestures made by Jimmy, highlighting his charismatic but duplicitous nature. In Emerald Fennell's 2020 film Poisoning Young Women, a clip from Night of the Hunter is playing in a scene where the protagonist's parents are watching TV on a couch. In a later scene, the song The Pretty Fly from the soundtrack of Night of the Hunter plays after the protagonist makes a disturbing discovery. The Night of the Hunter was released on DVD by MGM Home Entertainment in 2000. On November 26, 2010, the film was released on Blu-ray and DVD in the Criterion Collection in association with the University of California, Los Angeles Film Archive. Among other supplemental material, the Criterion edition includes various interviews with the cast and the crew, along with an appearance of the cast on the Ed Sullivan Show, performing a deleted scene from the film, and the 2.5 hour documentary Charles Laughton directs The Night of the Hunter. Kino Lorber released a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray edition of the film on May 30th, 2023. In 1974, film archivists Richard Gett and Anthony Slide retrieved several boxes of photographs, sketches, memos, and letters relating to the film from Laughton's widow, Elsa Lanchester, for the American Film Institute. Lanchester also gave the Institute over 80,000 feet of rushes and outtakes from the filming. In 1981, this material was sent to UCLA Film and Television Archive, where for the next 20 years they were edited into a 2.5 hour documentary that premiered in 2002 at UCLA's Festival of Preservation. The film was remade in 1991 as a TV movie starring Richard Chamberlain. The band Cardiacs have referenced the movie on numerous occasions. On their 1999 album Guns, the songs Clean That Mud Out of Your Soul and Wind and Rains is Cold both feature lyrics derived from dialogue from the movie. The cover art of their 1996 album Sing to God is also an homage to the closing shot of the film. In 2020, it was reported that Universal Pictures is working on a remake of the film set in the present day and being written by Matt Orton. In 2023, the Libertines released a single titled Night of the Hunter, which takes its title from the film, and it contains several lyrical allusions to its characters and plot. Peter Doherty, who co-wrote the song, said to Enemy, "We got the title from Charles Laughton's directorial debut, Night of the Hunter, starring Robert Mitchum as a preacher with love and hate tattooed on his knuckles." All right. Should I put Lillian Gish in these? Popularity 3,510, down 549. So this is supposed to be the third greatest movie of all time, and I'm not digging it. I didn't like Citizen Kane. Of course, what was I going to say? Sorry. Well, now my IMDb page is not loading, and we got too many tabs open again, I guess. Vertigo. Vertigo is, out of all the top 3 movies, I think Vertigo is my favorite. Citizen Kane and this one are kind of overrated, I think. Quite honestly. Oh, To Beat Kid, Do the Right Thing from Spike Lee was an homage to this film with banded brass knuckles with love and heat on Radio Rayhem. Adrian's in the chat room. I wanted to see this one. Now you've seen it for me. I have Vertigo on DVD. All right. I've got 2 people in the chat room. I'm on a roll with this. I knew this was a lamestream movie. Like I said, check out Vertigo, but skip this one and Citizen Kane because it's not as good as it's made out to be. It was condemned by the Catholic Church, this movie, for degrading the institution of marriage. But who cares if they're Protestants? They deserve to be in lousy marriage, right? Because they're outside the one holy apostolic church. A self-proclaimed preacher marries a gullible widow whose young children are reluctant to tell him where their real dad hid the $10,000 he'd stolen in a robbery. All right. More like this: The Killing, Touch of Evil, Double Indemnity, and Notorious. Double Indemnity is actually rated higher on IMDb. It gets an 8.3 out of 10. The sequence with Powell riding a horse in the distance was actually a dwarf on a pony. It was filmed in false perspective. A man who was sentenced to only 30 days for a misdemeanor would be sent to the county jail and not the state penitentiary, and thus would never be sharing a cell with the condemned man on death row. Rachel Cooper, it's a hard world for little things. This was edited into Histories du Cinéma, La Male de l'Absolu, 1999. I think I've actually seen that and reviewed it. Dream, Little One Dream, uncredited. Soundtrack, traditional arranged by Walter Schumann, sung by chorus during the opening credits, reprised off screen by an unidentified female when the children are on the run. Here's a review from Felix28 on IMDb, dated November 5th, 2005. Here's someone who's rating it a lot higher, 9 out of 10. Here we go. The title of the IMDb review is Overwhelming. I was lucky enough to see this in the cinema with a restored print. I had previously caught a snatch of it while channel surfing cable TV and saw enough, about 30 seconds, to realize this was worth watching through if I got the chance. I could barely speak at the end of the film. Pauline Kael called it one of the scariest movies ever made. She was absolutely right. Robert Mitchum becomes the embodiment of evil, and his pursuit of the children is so relentless and so menacing that it becomes impossible to believe that they can escape. The images are brilliant. There's a depth to black and white. The color somehow lacks, and it is used superbly here to create a sense of brooding terror. I don't mind the homily at the end. Like everything else in the film, it is done with utter conviction, and this makes it work. Charles Laughton saw it as an indispensable conclusion to the film, and the strength of his belief makes it indispensable. The images are so much part of the film that it would lose a great deal on the small screen, although my minimal exposure to it in that environment showed that it was still well worth watching. But if you get a chance to see it in a cinema, jump at it. Might actually be a better film to watch in the cinema. Because I'm watching it on a small screen. I can't see all of the... Of course, I like Hitchcock movies. I added as many as I could to my Netflix queue. And his television show was quite good, too. I think he had 2 television shows, the Alfred Hitchcock Hour and Alfred Hitchcock Presents, if I'm not mistaken. Alfred Hitchcock Presents is excellent television. My coworker actually gave me the disc to watch. She had a Vertigo poster right above her bed, and she drove the same car that's used in Vertigo. She had the same exact car, the Carmen Gia car. All right, so The Killing is a great film. It's a 7.9. Touch of Evil, I've never seen. Double Indemnity, of course, is great. Notorious is kind of overrated. I'm not too crazy about Notorious. But, yeah, ranks right up there with Double Indemnity, Citizen Kane, Vertigo. This film gets an X rating. From I'm looking at the trailer and it says it gets an X rating. The Man Who Knew Too Much. Oh, I don't think I've seen that. Maybe I'll add that to my maybe I have it on my list already. It's possible. I was going to say maybe I should add that to my list, but I probably already have it. Yeah, it's number 77 on my list. So your recommendation is already on my list. I have not reviewed it yet. All right. Speaking of my list, let's go down the pike to see what are the next 3 on my list. The Royal Bed, 1931. The Uh-Oh Show, 2011. And Jaws 2, 1978. Well, that's the end of my review. Laters.